not only was it great for its growth and timber characteristics, it had a lot of different uses. Wood products, you can see a split rail fence there. I think this is in Virginia. Agricultural uses, of course, people ate the chestnuts. They roasted them on open fires. People sang songs about them. Medicinal uses, you can see a medical pack there of chestnut leaves. There are antiseptic properties that chestnut leaves have. And of course, this seller, this is a great photo. Hot chestnuts, good for the brain. Try a bag. So chestnuts are great for a wide variety of things.
Original brain food.
Brain food, yeah. Because chestnut was such a prolific species and used for so many different things, it really runs the gamut for social and historical connections. And like I said, it even has, a couple songs about it, and the metaphor, that old chestnut, you can see it popping up in a lot of different places.
Well, and I've never tasted one, but I've heard the American chestnuts are just known for being particularly delicious. The ones we see at Christmas time are European species, I think, and I think they're quite good, but I hear the American ones are just that much tastier.
They're a bit sweeter. The smaller the chestnut you have, the faster starches convert into sugars. So chestnut, chinkapins are the sweetest right off the tree. Americans are quite sweet right when you harvest them. Chinese and then the Europeans. If you let them sweeten up over time, the Europeans can get quite sweet as well. But it takes them a lot longer for all those starches to convert into sugars.
Oh, I got it.
I didn't realize there was animation in there.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. There you go. What did the pre-blight population of American chestnut look like? This is a great picture from the mountainsides in Shenandoah National Park in 1912. And people, you can read a lot of anecdotal accounts of people saying that the mountains in July, it looked like there was snow cover in July because of the chestnut blossoms. So what you're seeing here, all the white tops of these trees, these are male chestnut flowers called catkins. I mean, you can see how densely populated the species was in these areas. In some cases, you could see American chestnuts were 25%, 50% of the forest. They were very densely populated in certain areas, not so much in others, but an estimated 4 billion American chestnut trees were on the landscape right before the blight arrived. So we're talking late 1800s, early 1900s. It's a disturbance-dependent species. So while chestnut was very prolific and very high population in the late 1800s, it wasn't always the case. European settlement and disturbance really allowed this species to take over the eastern U.S. forest.
Oh, that's interesting.
And come into dominance.
So it's sort of like obviously a large, tall, dominant tree, but in some cases, just the wood mass, the mass of the chestnuts completely dominates the forest.
It can.
Yeah.
So what happened? Why are we here talking about the American chestnut? And the reason is because there's a deadly fungal disease caused by a fungus called Cryphonectria parasitica. So you can see here, the middle picture is what the chestnut blight looks like on a small sprout, a small American chestnut sprout. It's a very orange canker. It's unlike virtually anything else that you'll see in the forest. It's very noticeable. And the fungus enters through a wound in the bark or some sort of other opening. So when the bark starts to crack and become mature, the fungal spores can get in there, germinate, and create this canker, and can quickly kill the tree by girdling it. It basically strangles the tree. So a tree like this can be dead in as little as 1 season. It gets infected and it can die in a summer. Sometimes on the larger trees, it can take 2 to 5 years for a tree with full susceptibility to perish. It can work very quickly. You can see here in the map, it didn't take very long for this disease to spread throughout the native range. 1904 is the date that we use for sort of the initiation of blight in the U.S. Now, it was certainly in the U.S. before then, but it was identified by a zoologist at the Bronx Zoo in 1904. So we use that as sort of our starting date of the pandemic or the epidemic. And by 1950, it had been discovered and wiped out a majority of the American chestnut throughout its native range. Huh. Now, it's important to keep in mind that while the disease kills all of the above ground portion. It does not kill the below ground portion. And there are several reasons for that. But because it doesn't kill the root system, the American chestnut tree can resprout. And that's why the species is not extinct today.
Amazing.
So here's a picture. Again, I'm going to use a lot of Shenandoah National Park slides because we have a lot of historical photographs from there. But this is what it looks like when you have a highly densely populated area of a single species. You know, we're seeing that today, you know, stands of hemlock, stands of ash, particularly, you can see a very similar picture of what we're losing today. So like I said, it's really important to note that the American chestnut, or that the chestnut blight fungus does not kill the below ground portion of the American chestnut, and that allows the species to resprout relatively prolifically. And in fact, what's really interesting, if you read some early accounts, publications in the late 1800s, early 1900s, American chestnut was managed by silviculturalists and foresters as a coppice species. So they would go in and they would timber the tree and then let it resprout, and that's what they were managing. So you can see a sprout here at the bottom. So because they sprout a lot, the American chestnut species itself is not threatened, it's not endangered, it's not extinct. There are an estimated 430 million American chestnut stems out on the landscape. What's important to note, though, is that 84% of those stems are less than an inch in diameter.
What a crazy type of resilience that they'll just keep sprouting. Now, when they were purposely coppicing these trees, it's because they're using the cane. They're basically using the sticks as caning material, or because
no, it would be for timber. So I had the privilege to go to central China and examine the same thing. Their timber species is called Castanea henryi. And they managed those populations in relatively the same way, where they would let them get to a certain size, be it, you know, a pole size timber tree, you know, something like that, or if they needed bigger, or firewood. It depends on what you're utilizing the timber or the lumber for. And then so you would take that then for whatever purpose and then allow it to resprout, and then you would still have, you know, your population of trees that you could then harvest, you know, on whatever rotation you're going for.
But in that case, they're not producing nuts.
Well, they won't, again. So chestnuts produce nuts at about age 5 to 8.
Yeah.
Depending on a lot of different factors, they can wait a longer time. As long as they have full sunlight and they're happy where they're at, they can produce chestnuts very early on in their lifespan. And that gets important too a little bit later on, in terms of its value to wildlife and masting. What I like about this map, though, is you can see how densely populated American chestnut sprouts are in various parts of the range today. So that red outline is the native range. We've seen that a couple of times throughout this presentation. And you can see that the range has constricted now in terms of how many trees are out there. Southern Ohio, Southern Indiana, Northern Alabama, we're not seeing populations that used to be there. But you can see the core of the range, it's still highly densely populated. If you hike the Appalachian Trail, you are going to see chestnuts all over the place until you get to like the Vermont, Massachusetts border, and then the elevation gets too high. But you can see hundreds of thousands of American chestnuts in that core part of the range. Again, they're all small. They all kind of look like that that picture of a little sprout with a dead stem on it,
right?
But they're there. So even though they're a bunch of trees, we call them functionally extinct because they're not doing what they're supposed to do in the landscape.
Right. Yep.
You know, I think the American chestnut, we talk a lot about why should you care about the American chestnut, and I think it's, you know, it's not that the American chestnut is gone. Obviously, we care very much about this single species, but there's a lot of importance of native species to the greater food web. And, you know, you mentioned Doug Tallamy in your conversation with him. He's done some just remarkable work on how important native species are to insects. And so you can see here, there's bees and other insects, you know, harvesting pollen from the chestnut. Tons of caterpillars eat on the American chestnut. There's evidence that as many as 5 different insect species of moth or caterpillar species perish because of the loss of the American chestnut. There's evidence that the passenger pigeon or the Allegheny wood rats populations declined dramatically because of the loss of the American chestnut. Um, Lots of different things really like using the American chestnut. Now, the whole eastern forest ecosystem didn't collapse when American chestnut was lost. Oaks filled in that niche. They're a very similar species. They're in the
Right.
same family. But there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about continued erosion and loss of native species. We have a picture of a trout there and of some larvae. Why should we care about those? Well, the leaf litter falls into the water, it decomposes and then feeds these aquatic types of wildlife. So while you don't even think about how can a forest tree species affect life in a stream, there are a lot of different ways that this interconnectedness that we've been talking about even to start this talk. So talking about mass production of the American chestnut versus the oak, which really filled the niche that chestnut left during its demise. You can see here that chestnuts produce more nuts earlier in their lifespan than do oaks, most oaks, and they produce more trees per size. More nuts per size of the tree. So the other difference is that you have a dependable mast crop. Most oaks are pretty well known to be cyclical. They may only mast every 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer, whereas chestnut typically, while its numbers go up and down, you can have a pretty dependable crop year after year. The main reason for that is that the flowers, you can see them there at the top of the screen, the flowers come out a lot later than oaks do. Oaks come out, depending on where you're at, April, May timeframe, and they can still get hit by late frosts. Yep. Whereas chestnut flowers usually come out in late June, early July, and so they can miss that frost pocket.
That late. And sorry, mast just refers to the production of the nuts, which are this super important food source for all sorts of creatures.
Correct. So I should probably look up the technical definition of mast, but you can have soft mast like berries and fruits, or you can have hard mast. And I think mast basically just refers to things that wildlife eats.
Right.
So soft mast like berries and fruits, and then hard mast are nuts.
Great. All right, a top 10 list. I like it.
A top 10 list of reasons to restore the American chestnut. And I think, these all hit different elements, and some people can pick and choose the things that mean more to them. But again, we're on this sort of jack of all trades aspect of the American chestnut. Obviously healthy forest, you have increased biodiversity, you can improve the health. It's an American legacy. There's no doubt that this runs pretty deep in American history, especially Appalachian culture. Consistent mast we just talked about. Reclamation is an interesting one because the coal fields of the eastern U.S. Almost overlap entirely the native range of the American chestnut, and American chestnut grows really well on reclaimed mine lands, and so we're doing that a lot of different projects to use American chestnut for that purpose.
Which is extremely important, for example, for warbler nesting and things like that. So, that's great.
Right, that early successional habitat. We've been working a lot with various management groups to implement those kinds of projects. We hope that the American chestnut work that we're doing sets a template for restoration of other forest tree species that are under attack. We mentioned versatile timber. There's a lot of different uses for it. Craftsmanship. We have a lot of wonderful people who do amazing carvings and turnings of bowls, and American chestnut is a really interesting wood to work with. Obviously, we talked about the nuts and how tasty they are. Landscaping, that can be a give or take. A lot of people don't necessarily want burrs, to sit on or to walk on, but it can be a great shade tree and can be very pretty, especially with the showy flowers.
And I will say, those are some of the sharpest burrs I've run into. They are
they are sharp. My first day on the job, this was almost 20 years ago. My first day on the job, I wore flip-flops into the orchard, and that was the last time I did that. I don't recommend it.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah. And then of course conservation. We work with tons of people and various partners and scientists who are continually coming up with amazing techniques to work on this species, and we hope that the whole of what we're doing can can provide others with templates to use for conservation and restoration.
That's great. And yeah, bringing people together, bringing all these ideas together. It's really good.
Yeah. And so that's sort of where I want to end my piece, which is, I've worked in the foundation for about 20 years now. And while I love the science and the conservation work of the foundation that we do, my favorite part is the network that we work with, whom we work, especially the citizen scientists and volunteers. We can't do this work without their buy-in. Not only their buy-in, but the resources that they have. There in the lower right-hand corner, one of my interns from a few years ago from Duke University, she was helping me, and we went out to Jim Hissom's farm in northwestern Pennsylvania. And, you just have these people from just various walks of life brought together by a singular species. And so that's why, I love this term charismatic megaflora. You've got the panda, you've got the river otter, the American chestnut, I think, is up there.
Yeah, it's a tree you can,
that you can really, sort of be like, oh, wow, that's a really cool tree, and kind of get behind other really important aspects of sustainability and restoration. You can use the American chestnut to talk about a lot of these other different topics, which continue to be really big picture topics, because with increased globalization, you've got increased pressure on our forests. We're already seeing, we're in the midst of a pandemic in the human realm because of increased globalization. Our forests had already been encountering that for decades and are continuing to do that. So I think there's going to be a continued need for us to continue to engage people from all walks of life, and really have a broad network of people to engage with these types of issues that we're going to continue to face.